Hi everyone. So this is video 3 of what I'm revealing here about the worship of Saturn and the time of the little season. And I was going to go straight into information about Noah and Ham and Ham seeing Noah's nakedness and Semiramis, which I will go into in this video, but I found some really important information regarding the Exilarch, which I discussed in my last video, and I really want to put this in first here and get this information out there. And it totally ties in with the little season which I believe we're in, and that there is actually an aristocratic family who are referred to as, in the Bible, the dragon. And I think personally now that according to Herod's historian, he said the Herod family were related to this Exilarch families from Babylon, the lineage of King David, who stayed in Babylon and bent the knee to Baal. Now, Josephus said that Herod's historian was trumping up this claim so that he could claim to be of the throne of David. But, you know, I personally think that it makes sense. And Josephus said this because Herod was actually an Edomite, he said, but he was only half Edomite. And I think that this perhaps family lineage may have come in from Herod's mother's side, from the Nabatian people. And, with this information I'm going to reveal here, it actually, it doesn't prove this, but it connects a lot of dots. So we have here Herod and his historians. In this introductory chapter, we lay out the scope and aim of our book. Who was Herod and who wrote about him? In particular, who was Nicholas of Damascus and why would we want to try to recover his account of the king? We note that Herod's modern biographers regularly make assumptions about Nicholas that are based on a questionable premise and opt for a new approach. We set our treatment within the history of scholarship and justify our methodological approach to Josephus' text in the hope of recovering Nicholas' own views on the Eastern monarch and most more besides. And this is in regards to this book, Herod in History, Nicholas of Damascus and the Augustan Context. And it says here, I can't view this book, it's from Oxford Academic, so it's just an outline. Most of our information about Herod the Great derives from the accounts found in Josephus' Jewish War and Jewish Antiquities. Together they constitute quite a unique resource on one of the most famous personalities of ancient history. But whence did Josephus get his information? It is commonly agreed that his primary source was Nicholas of Damascus, Herod's court historian. Though the extent to which Josephus adapted his material remains disputed, this book takes a modern source critical approach to Josephus' extensive account of Herod's reign to suggest that Josephus did indeed rely heavily on Nicholas's work, but that previous scholarship was mistaken in seeing Nicholas as a mere propagandist. Nicholas may have begun his universal history while Herod was alive, but he finished it after his death. He thus had no reason to write propaganda. This makes his work all the more interesting, for what we have instead is something rather different, a Syrian intellectual claiming a place in the Augustan Rome. By telling a story about what the Augustan world looks like on the eastern periphery, we delineate Nicholas's approach to various critical topics in Herod's reign in order to reveal the Damascus perception of clan kingship, the impact of empire, and the difficulties involved in ruling Judea. Most significantly, we uncover an Eastern intellectual's view on how to succeed and how to fail in a new Augustan world order. In this book, The World of the New Testament, by Joel B. Green and Lee Martin MacDonald, Josephus identifies Herod's father as Antipater as an Idumean by race, but Idumea was more a geographical than an ethnic identification. From their homeland east and south of the Dead Sea, the Edomites had been displaced by the Nabatian Arabs and migrated to the west of the Dead Sea, so that Idumea in the late Hellenistic period comprised parts of what had been southern Judea, the northern Negev, the inland Phoenicia. Its inhabitants therefore comprised of Jews, Arabs, Phoenicians, and Greeks in addition to Edomites. John Hyrcanus ruled in 134 to 104 BC, conquered Idumea for the Hasmonean kingdom, and the inhabitants were converted. So we know that Antipater was an Idumean, an Edomite, but Herod's mother was a Nabatian, and I keep trying to point this out that, you know, we have Helena Blavatsky's the Nabatians of Iraq, and in light of this Exilarch information, we know that the tribe of Judah that went to Babylon became very powerful because of their knowledge of agriculture and irrigation. And these Nabatians of Iraq were farmers and agriculturalists. It's about the agriculture of the Nabatians of Iraq. And they're a mysterious group that lived outside of Babylon. They also had knowledge of irrigation, which the city of Nabatea was set up on. They learnt to irrigate the water from the surrounding mountains to make it a very powerful merchant hub where people would bring their camels in to water them on the silk and spice road routes. And that only finished after a big earthquake happened in that region. I can't remember what year it was, but it was after the destruction of Jerusalem. And the earthquake destroyed those irrigation systems, and the city was no longer viable to live in. And so therefore they moved the city, or they moved Mecca, which was based in Petra, and they moved it to Saudi Arabia. Now, this connects these Nabatians of the Negev to the Nabatians of Iraq and Babylon, and I think it actually connects them to these merchants of Babylon who were these exilarchs. So they became powerful in Babylon because where they were situated on the Euphrates River, they learnt to control the trade that was coming down the river, and they became middlemen and merchants. They became bankers and tax collectors, and they were intermediaries between kings and princes and the merchant world. And we see that even with Daniel being called to the king as a prophet and a seer instead of the priest of Babylon. And we see that these people were intermingling and advising. They were advising kings and priests on different subjects. If these Babylonian Jews and merchants and all of these specific groups, Arabs, were all trading through the city of Petra and through Nabatea, it's reasonable to believe what Nicholas of Damascus writes in his history, that Herod's family were actually descendants of Jews from Babylon, not on his father's side, but on his mother's side. Josephus introduces him as a supporter of Hyrcanus II in the context of the struggle between the Hasmonean Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II in the early 60s BC. Josephus pays Antipater several compliments on account of his ancestry, wealth, and other advantages. He was at the forefront of his nation. He was distinguished for piety, justice, and zeal for his country. So Nicholas of Damascus, the court historian for Herod the Great, invented a Jewish ancestry from Babylon for the family in order to make Herod more acceptable to his Jewish subjects. But Josephus rightly discounts the claim. On the other hand, the indication of Edomite ancestry may be only a supposition. That the Hasmonean Antigonus called Herod a half Jew because he was an Idumean is not a clear reference to Edomite ancestry and may be simply derogatory. So, I mean, here we have what are the people of history, the Hasmoneans, saying Herod was a half Jew. I mean, would this not seem reasonable if Herod's mother was part of a Jewish merchant family who lived in Nabatea, but whose ancestry comes from these merchants of Babylon? It makes sense to me that Nicholas of Damascus was not lying in this sense. If I haven't explained it properly in my other videos, I'm going to explain here what the exilarchs are exactly. And it says here in this wiki tree, Jenny, Legend of Makhir of Narbonne. A summary is, in the Legend of Makhir of Narbonne, a scion of the hereditary Jewish exilarchs of Babylon named Makhir and descended from King David, was sent to the kingdom of the Franks at the request of their king. Makhir himself was made a member of the Frankish royal family and placed in charge of the Jewish community in Narbonne, maintaining parallel Jewish and Christian names and identities. His son William became a Christian saint after a heroic military career and a number of children. Because of Makhir, those who could trace their ancestry to Frankish kings could also trace their ancestry through the Jewish exilarchs to King David, and from thence through the biblical narrative to Adam and Eve. The actual facts are different. It says history. Jews in Babylonia from 597 BC to 942. From the time ancient Babylon first conquered Jerusalem in 597 BC and deported its prominent citizens to Babylonia, modern-day Iraq, a Jewish community there maintained a contentious existence. In 129 BC, the Parthians, who were ruling in Babylonia, gave the Jewish community their autonomy under the Jewish liaison called an exilarch. The line of exilarchs which followed claimed descent from King David and were proud of their genealogical purity. Because Babylonia did not become part of the Roman Empire, the Jewish community served as a refuge from periods of Roman persecution. After the destruction of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem in the year 70, Babylon became a center of rabbinic scholarship. In the year 220, a center of Babylonian Jewish academia was founded at the Babylonian town of Sura. In the year 315, the Code of Constantine restricted Jews and other non-Christian rights in the Roman Empire. As a result of persecution by the newly Christianized Roman Empire, the importance of Babylonia outside the empire as a refuge for Jews increased. In the year 426, the Babylonian Talmud was compiled. The year 629 saw the end of a devastating war between the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire and the Persian rulers of Babylonia, which left both exhausted. In a decade that followed, Muslim armies from newly unified Arabia swept through Syria, Babylonia, Jerusalem, and Egypt. Under the new Umayyad Caliphate of Caliph Umar, the Babylonian Jewish community with its exilarchs persisted. By the year 711, Umayyad armies had invaded and conquered Spain. The year 750 saw the beginning of the Abbasid Caliphate, beginning a golden age of Islamic culture. Baghdad was founded in 762. The Abbasid Caliphate, which lasted until 1268, fought against the Umayyad remnants in Europe and were willing to form alliances with the Christian Frankish kingdom to do so. The office of exilarch was abolished in 942. There is no definitive list of all the exilarchs. More than one has been attempted, and they differ by omissions, additions, and contradictions. The list compiled by David Hughes is one of the most extensive, but does not cite sources. All right, so this is important because who they claim to be exilarch today, they don't have a definitive list of genealogy from this lineage. They're just claiming it. So, they claim it, they believe it, we are victim to it. So despite the fact whether it's actually true or not, they live and believe that it's true, and we are, in our modern system, a victim of their belief system. The Frankish kingdom and the Umayyad Caliphate. In 711, Umayyad Caliphate forces conquered Spain and established their capital at Cordoba under an emir. In 718, Charles Martel became mayor of the palace under the Merovingian kings of the Franks and effective ruler of the Franks until his death in 741. 2 years later, in 720, Umayyad forces from Spain advanced across the Pyrenees Mountains and invaded Gaul. In 732, the historic Battle of Tours saw Frankish and Burgundian forces led by Charles Martel defeat Umayyad forces led by Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi, who was killed. The victory gave Charles his name Martel, the Hammer, and established Frankish power. In 754, Merovingian rule of the Franks, already nominal with real power in the hands of the mayors of the palace, ends with the crowning of Charles Martel's son Pepin the Short. So Pepin the Short was the father of Charlemagne, and Charlemagne, I believe his mother was an exilarch. So therefore, all of the descendants of Charlemagne on the royal houses of Europe claim that they are of the House of David, and this is where it comes from. In 756, Abd al-Rahman, the Umayyad emir of Cordoba, refuses to recognize the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. In 759, the Umayyad are expelled from Narbonne after a 40-year rule. In 765, a Frankish embassy visits Baghdad, returning 3 years later. The Abbasid Caliphate has an interesting allying with the Franks against the Umayyads. The Frankish embassy returned, bringing gifts from the Caliph, including a mechanical clock and an elephant. In 768, an Abbasid embassy comes to France. Jewish scholars, a Jew, Isaac, is mentioned. Were often key translators and intermediaries in the embassies. In 777, the Abbasid rulers of northern Spain contacted the Carolingians for help against the Umayyad rulers of southern Spain. In 797, contacts continued, this time concerning a potential Carolingian Abbasid alliance against the Byzantine Eastern Roman Empire. So Narbonne in southern France was once a port city on the Mediterranean, important to Rome at the crossroads of the Via Domitia connecting Italy to Spain, and the Via Aquitaine, which led to the Atlantic. In 462, the city was handed over by its Roman military leader to the Visigoths and became a capital of the Visigoth province of Septimania. Now, this came up in my last video. Septimania was a Jewish kingdom. In 719, it was conquered by the Umayyad Caliphate, which ruled it for 40 years until Frankish leader Pepin the Short conquered in 759. Narbonne had a Jewish community since about the 5th century, and in the 12th century was home to an important Jewish exegetical school and was mentioned in the Talmudic works for its scholars. So, legend. In 1161, Sefer HaKabbalah, the legend of Makhir, first appears in the Sefer HaKabbalah, the book of tradition, written by Abraham ibn Daud and Abraham ben David in about 1161. It actually first appears as a gloss to 1/14th or 15th century copy of a manuscript of the Sefer, which is the most important textual source for the lineage of the Jewish Nesim in Narbonne. The chronicle contains a legend of the foundation of the line by Makhir, a descent of King David in the reign of Charlemagne. So in the Sefer, Abraham asserted several things as traditions. Charlemagne asked Harun al-Rashid to send him a rabbi from the house of David. Or in the older way of phrasing, King Charles Martel sent to the king of Baghdad, Caliph, requesting that he dispatch one of the Jews of the seed of royalty of the house of David. In response, a scholar by the name of Rabbi Makhir duly came to the west again. In an older phraseology, the Caliph heeded the request and sent Charles a magnate, a sage, Rabbi Makhir by name. After capturing Narbonne from the Saracens, Charlemagne granted Makhir a third of the city. King Charles settled Makhir in Narbonne, the capital city, and gave Makhir great possessions at the time he captured it from the Ishmaelites, or the Arabs. The king made Makhir a nobleman and designed, out of love for Makhir, good statutes for the benefits of all Jews dwelling in the city, as it is written and sealed in a Latin charter, and the seal of king therein bears his name Carolus, and it is in their possession at the present time. The chronicler claimed that special privilege issued by their king confirmed this grant of land and placed the Jewish community in Narbonne under royal protection. Makhir took a wife, a woman from among the magnates of the town. Prince Makhir became chieftain there, and his descendants were closely interrelated with the king and his descendants. Makhir founded an important Talmudic school in Narbonne. So it says here, whatever the place and origin of the text, it may be reasonably assumed to reflect a local Jewish belief in this foundation legend by the 13th century or later, and there is no reason to doubt the succession of Nessim in the 11th or 13th centuries as encapsulated in it. Taylor notes that the legend of the Saphir allows one to reconstruct a pedigree of the Jewish leaders of Narbonne, purportedly Makhir's descendants, beginning with 1-2 doors in the later 11th century and extending through to the beginning of the 14th century. Unfortunately, Taylor adds, no sources fill the gaps between the legendary 18th century foundation or affirmation of Narbonne's royal Jewish dynasty and the later 11th century, when the Sefer HaKabbalah text supports a continuous pedigree. We cannot now determine the validity of the Davidic origins of the Jewish dynasty of Narbonne, or even its continuity or the names of the individual Nassim before the 11th century. And do they believe that they are of the lineage of the House of David? Yes. And do they live as if they control the world by the fact that they inherit this lineage? Yes. And, can they prove it? Probably no, according to the information we have. Have they kept their own lineage and descent? I dare say they have, and so therefore they probably do have proof of this lineage. Okay, so if we look here on the map of Narbonne, France, it is on the Gulf of Lion and in the same vicinity where the Rhone River enters into the Gulf of Lion, not too far from Lyon, France, and Geneva, Switzerland, up here where the Lake Geneva is. A very powerful region, as I said, for merchants taking their merchandise down the Rhone into the Gulf of Lion. And also on the other side of Italy, we have Venice. And Venice was the port city that the cross-land Silk Road trade from Asia came into Europe. So we have the merchants of Venice, who were, I now believe, are these Exilarch merchants from Babylon. And I do have a video on Venice and the Venetian systems relating to Queen Esther and the Jews and the festival of Purim. But yeah, they would bring these merchandise in from Asia across the land, and also they would trade by sea. So how many Jews actually did return from Babylon to Jerusalem to rebuild the Second Temple? And here in the Jewish Virtual Library, it says, following a decree by the Persian king Cyrus, conqueror of the Babylonian Empire, some 50,000 Jews set out on the first return to the land of Israel, led by Zerubbabel, a descendant of the house of David. Less than a century later, the second return was led by Ezra the scribe. Over the next 4 centuries, the Jews knew varying degrees of self-rule under Persian, 538 to 333 BC, and later Hellenistic, Ptolemaic, and Seleucid overlordship, 332 to 142. The repatriation of the Jews under Ezra's inspired leadership, construction of the Second Temple on the site of the First Temple, refortification of Jerusalem's walls, and establishment of the Knesset Hagdolah, Great Assembly, as the supreme religious and judicial body of the Jewish people, marked the beginning of the Second Jewish Commonwealth. Within the confines of the Persian Empire, Judah was a nation centered in Jerusalem, whose leadership was entrusted to the high priest of the Council of Elders. So I did quote in my last video that 7,000 remnant were in 1 Kings 19, set apart by God, and I did get that wrong. That was actually in reference to the first exile of the Northern Kingdom by Elisha. Basically, there were 7,000 men of that time who were kept as a remnant by God, the others who didn't bend their knees to Baal. And, it doesn't say it here, but it is somewhat repeated in this genealogy of the Exilarchs, because in Ezra 2, it says here, the captives who returned to Jerusalem. Now, these are the people of the province who came back from captivity, to those who had been carried away from Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away to Babylon, and who returned to Jerusalem and Judah, everyone to his own city. Those who came with Zerubbabel were Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Reliah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispah, Bigvai. So there's a whole list of people, and it shows a genealogy here of the descendants of the house of David who went back to Jerusalem. So it says the Levites, the sons of Jeshua, and Kadmiel, the son of Hodavi, the singers, the sons of Asaph, 128, the sons of the gatekeepers, the sons of Solomon's servants, the son of Sotai. So we have all these genealogies here that keep the line of David that went back to Jerusalem, and these genealogies are cited in Matthew and Luke as Jesus' genealogy and claim to being the king of David and the root of Jesse. The other people that stayed in Babylon stayed for financial and power reasons, and they were, as the Jews of Babylon were quite powerful at the time, they were merchants. They started running merchant trades along the Euphrates, and they were bankers, tax collectors, and they had gold. I mean, it says here that some of the heads of the fathers' houses, when they came to the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem, offered freely for the house of God to erect it in its place. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for the works 61,000 gold drachmas, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly garments. It says here also that in Ezra 1, the end of the Babylonian captivity, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in the writing, saying, "Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth the Lord God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah, who is among you all his people. May his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel, which is in Jerusalem, and whoever is left in any place where he dwells, that let the men of his place help him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, besides the freewill offerings of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem." So they were in Babylon, but they weren't poor. They weren't slaves. They had gold and silver and wealth and free offerings. I mean, they obviously had enough of this to give to the rebuilding of the temple. So it says here also, then the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests of the Levites, with all whose spirits God had moved. So God only moved the spirits of the people that went back. There's around 50,000 people that went back. They arose to go up and build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. And all those who were around them encouraged them with articles of silver and gold, and with goods and livestock, and with precious things, beside all that was willingly offered. And King Cyrus also brought out the articles of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from Jerusalem and put in the temple of his gods. And Cyrus, king of Persia, brought them out by hand of the Mithridath and treasure, and counted them out to the Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. So this prince of Judah, the Exilarch, this is the number of them: 30 gold platters, 1,000 silver platters, 29 knives, 30 gold basins, 410 silver basins of a similar kind, and 1,000 other articles. All the articles of gold and silver were 5,400. All these Sheshbazzar took with the captives who were brought from Babylon to Jerusalem. So this leader of the house of David in Babylon, Sheshbazzar, went back to Jerusalem. He didn't stay in Babylon. So these exilarchs, they're this family that stayed in Babylon, and they can't even claim the proper lineage of their family. So today they're claiming Messiah through Rabbi Schneerson, and who's passed on now, but I'm sure there's somebody else who's popped up who they consider this messianic Rebbe. And and they can't even prove the direct lineage of their Exilarch family to King David. But Jesus can, and he has his lineage quoted in Matthew and Luke. So it was in Babylon that these Exilarch Jews wrote down the Talmud and the exegesis of the Torah. So basically, we had the Torah given to Moses, and they declared that that wasn't enough and it was too complicated for people to understand. And they had to bring in their own explanation and so that they could have more power and more control over the people. So according to this website here, jewishanswers.org, and it's obviously a Jewish person writing this, someone's asked the question, I'm so confused. I don't understand which version of the Bible is the Jewish version. I'm also confused with the Torah, Talmud, and Kabbalah. What's what? And the answer here, it says, as time went on, it became too difficult to remember everything in the written Torah. So we had to write more books to remember more books, obviously. So Rabbi Yehuda the Prince wrote the Mishnah in the year 1800. So that's AD. That was not written in Jerusalem. That was written in Babylon. The Mishnah is the basic outline of the oral transmission, but it is, so the oral transmission, the oral Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmud was an oral transmission until sometime in the AD, they were written down. But it is cryptic enough so that one still needs a rabbi to understand it properly. So we can't understand the word or the meaning of God. We need a rabbi to interpret it for us. We need a priest over us. And that's why they don't like Jesus, because Jesus is telling us we don't have a priest over us. We don't need a priest. We have him as the intermediary between God and man, and that's all we need. And they don't like that because with the belief in Jesus, we cut out their necessity. They are now invalid. The lineage of David after Jesus, as John the Baptist said, the axe is at the root of the tree, is invalid. The priesthood or the rabbis are invalid. All of their books, all of their writings, because of Jesus, are invalid. And this is why they don't like Jesus. This was not enough. So 300 years later, Ravina and Rav Ashi recorded the Talmud, which expounded on the Mishnah. Still, the Talmud is very difficult, and one needs to study it extensively to understand its structure, method, and logic. Kabbalah is the mystery teachings of the Torah handed down through the generations. As time went on, it stood to become somewhat revealed, first by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in the 1st century AD, as recorded in the Zohar, then by the great Azrael of the 16th century Safed. To be properly understood, one needs to master much of the Torah and the Talmud first. So this is also an exoteric understanding for the profane. That's what they consider us, the profane. And the esoteric version is the opposite, because we look into Freemasonry, and the Kabbalah is said to come from the Garden of Eden, and they follow their lineage through Cain and through Enoch and Tubal-Cain. The Kabbalah is not given down to the patriarchs and the prophets. It's a teaching that comes from Mystery Babylon down through that lineage. This was written here by Rabbi Meir Goldberg. So it's this is an explanation from a rabbi. The Talmud also tells us that Jesus is boiling in hell in a vat of excrement. So we know what a corrupt book this is. We know how corrupt these exegesis of the Torah are, and we know that this is what Jesus came to fight in the temple at the time. So these Babylonian priesthood were in the temple. The Sanhedrin set up its own courtroom through the wall of the temple, and they would send people to trial based on their own laws and exegesis of the Torah. And basically Jesus said that they were creating yokes of burden for the people that God never intended. They're not based on the laws of God. They're creating their own laws and putting yokes about people that people cannot live up to. And we know today that they do the same thing. You know, we have all these legal loopholes that the rabbis create so they can get away with doing things like abusing little children and different teachings. So of the Talmud, children under 3 are not adults, therefore they can touch them up, and different crazy laws that they use loopholes to justify. So in my last video, I was talking about the groups that promote Noahide and their racist and prejudiced view that according to the Kabbalah, they are a higher species and therefore have the right to determine laws and morals to the lower classes, which they consider to be the descendants of Noah. So the champion of this Chabad movement is Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and it says, known to adherents of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, which is Donald Trump and his son-in-law Jared Kushner and his daughter Ivanka Trump. So I'm guessing most of my listeners are aware of the intentions of Donald Trump. But for anybody who isn't aware, in Donald Trump's book, Trump, the Way to the Top, it states here, 4 people have given me sound nuggets of wisdom that have helped me keep business in perspective. When I was 19, I complained to David Geffen about some other people in the entertainment business who were making a lot of money and who didn't deserve it. Now, number one, David Geffen, he's a music industry promoter of bands. So let's just look him up. David Lawrence Geffen is an American film producer, record executive, and media proprietor. In music, he co-founded Asylum Records with Elliot Roberts in 1971 before founding Geffen Records in 1980, DGC Records in 1990, and co-founding DreamWorks Records with Mo Ostin, Michael Ostin, and Lenny Waronker in 1996. In film, he founded the Geffen Film Company in 1986 and co-founded DreamWorks SKG with Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg in 1994. Now, this guy has some pretty suspect background, and I've heard basically that he is into young boys and having parties. So similar to Epstein parties, probably was on Epstein Island at some point, or I dare say he has his own island. He doesn't need to go to Epstein Island. So here's a another association Trump has with a pervert. So it's not just Jeffrey Epstein. One day, when my Kabbalah teacher Eitan Yadini asked how I was going, I told him I need a break. I was thoroughly exhausted, overwhelmed, and overworked. And Eitan then said, "Do you know what you should do now?" I thought he was going to encourage me to take some time off, but instead he replied, "No, go to work harder. Be careful what you ask for because you may get it." Eden was right. If I ask for a break, God may hear me and I may get one, a long one. I took this advice to heart and started to work even harder. So why does Donald Trump need a Kabbalah teacher? I mean, why does anyone need a Kabbalah teacher? He's not Jewish, apparently. So we know that Donald Trump is well skilled and taught in the Kabbalah, and his affiliation is with Chabad Lubavitch and the Kabbalah and any agenda that these Kabbalists have. He is known as the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or simply the Rebbe, was a Russian-American Orthodox rabbi and the most recent Rebbe of the Lubavitch Hasidic dynasty. He is considered one of the most influential Jewish leaders of the 20th century. And we know that that lady that I posted in the video said that Rebbe is part of a ancient lineage of really important family lines of these rabbi. As a leader of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, he took an insular Hasidic group that almost came to an end with the Holocaust and transformed it into one of the most influential movements in religious Jewry. I think there have been more influential than we know it for a very long time, but they have just been given this power over this little season of the dragon. So as the lady in the video told us, that these Chabad Lubavitch people consider Rabbi Schneerson to be their Messiah, or the incarnation of Messiah. And since President Jimmy Carter, presidents of America have signed up to institute the Noahide laws, that these prejudice laws of this particular group that they're pushing on the entire earth. It says the Rebbe's guidance to presidents of the United States. Successive American administrations recognize the extraordinary role of the Rebbe, Rebbe Menachem M. Schneerson, of righteous memory, in providing moral and religious direction for Jews and non-Jews worldwide, and sought his sage counsel on issues of global and local import. The Rebbe in turn would often emphasize the unique role the United States plays in the world in general, and particularly the extraordinary influence of the office of the American president. Some of the personal exchanges, both oral via emissary intermediaries and written, have yet to be uncovered. So shortly after President Jimmy Carter's inauguration in 1977, he honored the Rebbe by declaring 1977 to be the year of education. At the conclusion of that year, the United States of America celebrated the first Education Day USA on the Rebbe's birthday, according to the date of the Jewish calendar. A joint resolution signed by Congress and the President stated, the Congress recognizes a need for the nation to set aside on the calendar a day devoted to the importance of education to the lives of its citizens and to the general well-being of the nation, and the Lubavitch movement, which conducts educational activities at more than 60 centers in 28 states as well as around the world, is especially committed to the advancement of education, has proposed the establishment of an Education Day USA, and the World Jury marked in 1977 the 75th birthday of the revered and renowned Jewish leader, the head of the worldwide Lubavitch movement, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So the president then requested in a separate proclamation that all Americans observe the day in such a manner as reflects their commitment to education and their recognition of its importance to the welfare of this nation. So when they're talking about education, they're talking about educating the world in obeying Noahide. It says after Rebbe suffered a massive heart attack in 1977 on the eve of the Jewish holiday of Shemini Atzeret, the president sent a telegram to the Rebbe. I was sorry to learn of your illness. I hope that you will be strengthened, knowing that thoughts and prayers of your many followers and admirers, both were here and abroad, are with you. So, I mean, we could just see this total revolting suck-up job that the presidents of America are doing here. So we've got Reagan. All of the presidents since Jimmy Carter have signed up to this, to sell us out and throw us under the bus for these Noahide laws. So here on Jenny website, we have the ancestry of Hananiah Bastanai ben Hanani, Exilarch and Gon of Pemberitha. I mean, some of these names are really hard to pronounce. Also known as Ma'ahuna, Nastuna, and Saluba Talifa Bostanai. Anyway, he was born Pembeditha, Babylon, Persia. Died circa 638, and he was 40 to 58 years old. And he died in Baghdad, Iraq, and killed in battle. What's kind of interesting is this around the time of the Islamic Wars. And it says that, so basically he was the first exilarch of the third dynasty, exilarch at Babylon, Guriah, exilarch Rosh Gola of Jutsi leader. And in one of my other videos, I was pointing out how the Herods and these groups had married into the Sassanid dynasty. And I know them Herods did marry into a few of these groups, but how were they linked to Judaism? Well, he was the husband of Sassanid princess Dara Izdadwa and Adoa Bat Assad. So these exilarchs from Babylon, this line that claimed the lineage of King David and the throne of Judah, basically married into the Sassanid royal family. So I'll read down here. Bostanai was the first exilarch under Arabian rule. He flourished about the middle of the 7th century. He was the son of exilarch Hananiah Ha-Gaon in Sha'are Zedek. Seems to identify Bostanai with Hanani and tells that he was given for wife a daughter of a Persian king, Khosroes II, who died in 628 by the Caliph Omar, died 644. Abraham ibn Daud, however, in his Sefer HaKabbalah, says that it was the last Sassanid king, Yezdegerd, who gave his daughter to Bostanai, but in that case it could have been only Caliph Ali and not Omar who thus honoured the exilarch. It is known also that Ali gave a friendly reception to the contemporary Gaon Isaac, and it is highly probable, therefore, that he honoured the exilarch in certain ways as the official representative of the Jews. The office of the exilarch, with its duties and privileges as it existed for some centuries under the Arabian rule, may be considered to begin with Bostanai. Bostanai, 660-665, was the first exilarch to be recognized by Arab rule. His birth and much of his life is surrounded by legend. As a token of appreciation, Caliph Ali gave him the daughter of the Persian king Yezdegerd, so that's Yezdegerd III of Parthia, for a slave. Eventually, Bostanai married her. His first wife, Adoa, a Davidic Jewish princess relative, had 2 sons, Hisdai and Baradai. His second wife, Dara of Asdadawa, daughter of Zamastakut, excuse my pronunciation, and King Shaharijai III of Persia. So we're talking about Persian royalty now. The Parthite princess had 3 sons, Hisdai, Nehemiah, and Hanani, who was exilarch of Syria in 689 to 694. So now we're seeing where this Persian link and this Babylonian link comes in with these House of David and these exilarch people and the merchants, bankers of the world. Bustani ben Kafnei, frequently cited erroneously in some sources and by later scholars as Bustani ben Hanani, was the first exilarch after the Muslim conquest of the Sassanid Empire. Most of the sources about him are legendary and tendentious, and the few historical facts they provide are doubtful. According to the anonymous Gaonic Resposium from the 10th century, Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab confirmed Bustani in the office of exilarch and gave him Asdadwa, the captive daughter of the Sassanid king, in some sources Khosrow II, in others Yezdegerd III. The Sassanid princess bore Bustani 3 sons, Guranashah, Mardanashah, and Sharia. So, we can see how these Arab aristocracies now play into this Israel story. After Bustani's death, his 2 older sons by his Jewish first wife argued that their father had not converted the princess, his second wife, to Judaism, and therefore her children were slaves, not entitled to any part of his estate and not princes of the Davidic house. The sage of Surah decided in favor of Asdadwa's son, citing the Talmudic passage, "A man will not perform intercourse as an act of harlotry," in support of their ruling that Bustani could be assumed to have converted her before taking her for a wife. One of the sages named Hanani issued Asdadwa a writ of manuscript and even married his daughter to one of her great-grandsons. But the dispute over the legitimacy of the Bustani dynasty was not settled, and the issue was raised again and again in Gaonic Respinosa. Sharira Gaon, who was proud of his Davidic ancestry, emphasized that his family was not related to the descendants of Bustani. The story of Umar given Bustani, the Persian princess, is related without comment by Ibn Daud in his Sefer HaKabbalah. Another legend deals with Bustani's origins. It relates that the Persian king abolished the exilate and had all the members of the Davidic family killed. One of them had just been married and was murdered on his wedding night. But the widow survived the massacre and turned out to be pregnant. Soon afterwards, the king had a dream in which he was about to destroy a beautiful orchard, but the master of the garden, none other than King David, intervened, threatening to kill him if he uprooted the last young sapling. The king was spared when he promised to make every effort to take care of the sapling. So, I mean, it's interesting, like I'm talking about, Nabatea and this family lineage from these Arabic trading hubs, these rich Arabic families. This is all happening around the same time that Muhammad is taking over this region with his Jewish merchant wife, who was a Roman Catholic nun. I mean, irony or coincidence? I think not. The next day, the king searched for survivors of the massacre, found the young widow, and had brought her to the palace, where she gave birth to a child who was named Bustane. Then the child grew to manhood. He was brought before the king. A fly landed on the youth's brow, and he did not raise his hand to drive it away. Impressed by the young man's good manners, the king re-established the office of exilarch and appointed Bustane to the post. And that, says the legend, is why the exilarch seal was ever after shaped like a fly. Probably has nothing to do with the Lord of the Flies, or the family of the dragon who represents Satan. The tale in this version was printed for the first time in 1577 under the title Ma Ase Bet David, or The Deeds of the House of David, and is not known from elsewhere. Other Judeo-Arabic versions of the legend that differs in essential details was found in the Cairo Geniza. According to this account, the dynasty of the Exilarch Khafne was destroyed by a Persian king, but as a divine punishment because the Exilarch had mistreated a Gaon of the yeshiva who refused to endorse one of his rulings. The Gaon then had the same dream as was described above, and in conquest took Bustane, the only surviving son of Khafne, into his household. The conflict was brought before Caliph Umar, who ruled in favor of Bustane because of his fine manners and gave him a captive Persian maiden for a wife. Bustane married the Persian slave but did not convert her, and one of her descendants turned out to be Anan ben David, the founder of the Karaite sect. This Judeo-Arabic version of the legend, which has a clearly polemical intent, was used in the conflict between Nathan ben Abraham and Solomon ben Judah for leadership of the Palestinian yeshiva in the 11th century. The similarity of certain details suggests that it may have originated in the 10th century dispute between the exilarch David ben Zakkai and Sayyadja Gaon. There is no way of knowing which version of the legend is earlier, and it may be that they were both composed around the same time during one of the many conflicts between the Exilarch and the Gaonic academies. A third version of the legend, found in the chronicle Seder Olam Zuta, tells the same story about Ma Zutra, an exilarch during the Sasanian period, 100 years before the Arab conquest. It is unclear whether the story was the source of Bustane legend or vice versa. And, like I said, I keep saying, it's really interesting in this Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade movie that Steven Spielberg has alluded to the Holy Grail coming from Petra and these Arabic regions. An attempt has been made to trace certain historical statements about Bustane to Arabic sources. One of these is that he visited Medina in 623. Another is that he died in battle in 638, fighting on the Persian side against the Muslims. But both claims are based on uncertain and highly doubtful identifications of names and cognomens. The Arabic historical sources are discussed at length by Gill in 1979 and 2004. Grossman in 1984 and Gill in 2004 have argued most cognitively that for identifying Bustane's father as Khafne, with Hananeh being Bustane's actual Aramaic Jewish name for Hanan and Hananiah. So here we have like a ancestral lineage of these of Bustane the Exilarch, and here it says, note the descent line is called the Neha Pekod line from Bustane's grandson Hanani, son of Baradi, to Mari or Meir, Meir, We know that Mayer Amschel Rothschild, who emigrated to Spain in AD 941 and founded the Mayerite line, which is also called the Mariate line. Issue of Hanani Gaon of Sura above, Hillel Gaon of Sura. So we've got a whole bunch of different names who are descended from this bloodline. And down here it says we've got Eve, his cousin, daughter of Hai Gaon of Pumbedita, descendant of Samuel Nagyud by generation, daughter of Rabbi Nissim ben Yaakov, the parents of Yechiel, the father of Avram. So we've got their full family lineage and descent here. And I'm just going to read this part. It says, Mendel Lieb, ancestor of the Mendel family. They probably be related to the Mendelssohn family, who are related to the Rothschild family. And Menachem Mendel, called Tzemach Tzedek, adopted wife's surname Schneerson. The father of Samuel Schneerson, called Maharash. The father of Shalom Dovber. The father of Yosef Yitzhak, father of Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So here we go, this Messiah of Chabad Lubavitch Menachem Mendel Schneerson's ancestry goes all the way back to Hananiah Bastanai ben Hanai, Exilarch and Gaon of Pembeditha in Persia. I recommend people watching the Professor Hamamoto video on the Persian control of today's universities. Really interesting talk and lecture. Here it says the Maharal's house. So Yehuda Lieb, called Maharal of Prague, low ancestor of Alter Rebbe, ancestor of another modern family, the Schneersons. And senior line, Yanai Lo, father of Zalam Lieb, father of Yosef, father of Yehuda, Jude Lieb of Prosnitz, Jacob Frank, claimant, treated as king by many of Europe's royal courts. He was the father of Eve, daughter, considered the dynasty heiress and rightful queen, called the Divine Lady, among other epithets, titles, and styles, resides in a palace and presides over lavish courts in 1816. And on Wikipedia, Eve has her own Wikipedia page, and it says Eve Frank, or Eva Frank, was born Rachel Frank in Nikopol, Ottoman Empire, now Bulgaria, was a mystic cult leader and the only woman to have been declared a Jewish Messiah, according to historian Jerry Rabel. She was the daughter of Jacob Frank. Rachel Frank received the name of Eve in 1760 upon the conversion of her family to Catholicism. For much of her life, she accompanied her father during his travels, and after the death of her mother in 1770, the then 16-year-old Eve was declared to be the incarnation of the Shekinah, the female aspect of God, as well as the reincarnation of the Virgin Mary, and thus becoming the object of a devotional subcult herself near the Catholic Marian shrine of Czestochowa, with some followers keeping small statues of her in their homes. According to historian Jerry Rabel, she was the only woman to have been declared a Jewish Messiah. Her father Jacob spread the rumor that Eve, who was often called Eva Romanovna, at that point was an illegitimate child of Catherine II of Russia. Eve and her father repeatedly traveled to Vienna and succeeded in gaining the favor of the court. In November 1813, after the Battle of Leipzig, Tsar Alexander I, then Emperor of Russia, rode from Frankfurt to Offenbach to visit Eve. Wow, she had some pretty special guests happening there. So, Jacob Frank of the Sabbatian Frankists. So Jacob Frank here, Jacob Leibowitz, Polish Jewish religious leader who claimed to be the reincarnation of the self-proclaimed Messiah Sabbatai Zevi, and also the biblical patriarch Jacob. I mean, I can't believe we've been trying to link all of these particular groups up to one specific family and group, and here we have it. They're all related to these Persian exilarchs who claim to be of the house of David, who have married into the aristocracy of Europe, and these are the dragon that are ruling our world and having their little season in this time of their Sabbatian or their Saturnalian little season, and it all links up to these Sabbatian heresy to even commit ritual incest. The Polish rabbis attempted to place the Sabbatian heresy in Herem, the assembly of Lo, now Lviv in Ukraine, in 1722. Still, they could not fully succeed as it was widely popular amongst nascent Jewish middle class. Okay, so here it says, Bostani married Princess Adai, an Arabic Jewish princess, daughter of Asad ibn Hashim of Quraysh Sheikh, who died in 582. The princess is Dundwa, Sassanid daughter of Shah Yazdegerd III, but who was then considered by the Jews to have been a foreign wife. According to legend, Dara was the daughter of Charlemagne. And we know that Charlemagne was the predecessor of all the royal houses of Europe. A gift to the king of Persia in order to build a diplomatic bridge between the greatest kings of the period. Bostani could possibly be the son of Hanani, but most historians and researchers believe Guraya is the son of Sa'adia, grandson of Ma-Zutra II. Bostani was the first exilarch under Arabian rule, flourished in the middle of the 7th century. He had a son named Hanani Khaled by Adai, daughter of Asad ibn Hashim, the sister of Fatima bint Asad, mother of the first Shia Imam Ali bin Abi Talib, who in turn had a daughter named Judith, who married Nehemiah. So Nehemiah was the son of the Persian princess and the exilarch. Bustini was the son-in-law of the Persian Caliph. Bostani's father Hanani was son of Khofni, the 32nd exilarch from 560 to 581 AD, or current era. Guria had two sons by his Jewish wife Hasdai and Hanani, Gamaliel and Khaled, respectively, and three sons by his Persian wife. For the record, Asad ibn Hashim was the son of Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, the great-grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad. Hang on a minute, excuse me, the Prophet Muhammad. So here we have, Asad ibn Hashim was the son of Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, the great-grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad. Hashim ibn Abd al-Manaf was also the originator of the Banu Hashim clan of the Banu Quraysh tribe of Mecca. Hello, we have a connection between Babylon, between the Jews of Babylon and the religion of Islam. So let's go to Wikipedia for a moment, and we've got Asad ibn Hashim was the son of Hashim ibn Abd Manaf and the brother of Abd al-Muttalib. He was the father of Fatima bint Asad, the mother of Ali, and the cousin and wife of Abu Talib. Asad was a very respected person among the Qurayshi Arab tribe. He was a merchant. So, okay, his alarm bells. Whenever we see merchant, we have to assume a Jewish merchant. And in this case, I think so. And very often helped the poor. His name means lion. And here we go, another reference, the Lion of Judah. A brave one. His descendants usually use surnames al-Qurashi, al-Hashimi, al-Asadi, Sayyad, or Sharif, while some of his descendants avoid using any surnames. Historians are not clear about his exact date of birth, but according to the sources, he was born in 485 AD or 497 AD in Mecca. So now we have Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Mecca was actually in Petra at that time, so he was born in Petra. According to sources, he was of the religion of Abraham, as most Arabs were of Abraham's religion, including his tribe Quraysh, and his other uncles. Asad died before the birth of Muhammad. So Muhammad was his grandson. And it's not hiding anything here because this is the official source on Wikipedia. Pekod ben Bustanai Bar Adi Exilarch and Gaon of Sura, Syria. The Exilarchs are descendant of his. So why isn't it mentioning on his Wikipedia page that he's the grandfather of Muhammad? Here we have Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, and it's saying here that was the great-grandfather of the Islamic prophet Muhammad and the progenitor of the ruling Banu Hashim clan of the Quraysh tribe in Mecca. And here it says his child is Asad ibn Hashim. I mean, it blows my mind. Why is nobody talking about this? Why is nobody mentioning that Muhammad is a descendant of these exilarchs from Babylon, these Jewish exilarchs from Babylon who claim to be of the lineage of David? I mean, this is huge information, absolutely huge. And I've never ever heard anybody mention that Muhammad was anything but an Arab who had visions in a cave and married a rich merchant's daughter who, as we know, code for merchant is Babylonian tribe of Judah, or a Babylonian mystery religion worshipping Jew. Muhammad is a descendant of these people. This religion was completely contrived and concocted by these people, just the same as the Catholic Church was, because Muhammad's wife was a Catholic nun. Now we know that Muhammad's wife was more than likely an exilarch from Babylon, and so was Muhammad himself, from these family lineages. And these same people, exilarchs, I am convinced, started the Catholic Church as well. I will go into this more. It's going to take a separate video of looking at all this information, but I'm mind blown about this information and have never heard it before anywhere ever. And it's right there in your face. It's just you need to ask the right questions and go digging for it. And how many times have I said, according to the Fanda films and Dan Gibson information, which is on YouTube, Mecca used to be in Petra. And this all comes down to today's lineage, which I personally now am putting two and two together, thinking that Steven Spielberg, in his movie about the Holy Grail, was referring to the lineage of Rabbi Schneerson as being the messianic lineage that comes out of Petra and out of Mecca. Am I having too many leaps here? So who is Asad ibn Hashim? Well, here we have it. Bostanai was the first exilarch under Arabian rule, flourished in the middle 7th century. He had a son named Hanani, Khaled, by Adai, daughter of Asad ibn Hashim, was the son of Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, the great-grandfather of Muhammad. So his son, whose daughter married into this group here, who had a son, Bostani had a son, Hanani, by Adai, the daughter of Asad ibn Hashim, who was either a direct lineage of Muhammad, Asad ibn Hashim, or he was the father of Muhammad. So here we have a direct family link to Muhammad and these exilarch from Babylon. I mean, really, let's have a look at Muhammad's line. If we go to Muhammad's profile on Fab Pedigree, we have his grandfather is stated here as Abdul ibn Hashim, the very same. So he is the grandson of this particular person who married into these Persian exilarchs. So Muhammad himself was the direct grandson of an exilarch group from Babylon. Here we go, this orchestrated fake religion of Islam, this fake Messiah, Muhammad, who rose to heaven and came back again in one night on the Temple Mount. How blasphemous, is related to the Exilarch family of David from Babylon. Did I not say in one of my videos way back when I was trying to explain who the beast of the earth is and who the false Messiah that looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon and has horns like a dragon? When I said that the false Messiah was Muhammad, and here we have a false Messiah directly from the lineage of supposedly from King David, from the Babylonian exilarchs. And I dare say the same people started the Roman Catholic Church, because the same Roman Catholic Church started this religion. If we have a look at Muhammad's wife, Khadija, she is part of these same families. So I don't know exactly where these families are from, but if we have a look at her father's lineage, we have Mora ibn Ka'b, and Abd al-Uzza. And if we go to Abdul ibn Hashim, and this is the grandfather on the father's side of Muhammad, we have again here Amr ibn Murrah and Khalib ibn Murrah. So same family line on Muhammad's father's side, as well as his wife Khadija, Khalib ibn Murrah. They were related. So it wasn't like some little miracle boy that she married because he had such a wonderful vision from God and visions in a cave. It was a complete family affair of exilarchs from Babylon. The house of Bostanai thus developed into two branches. Upon the death of Bostanai, his son, by his first Jewish wife, insisted that their father's foreign wife as well as their three sons were illegitimate, and as such had no claim to the succession. The judges were divided in opinion, but finally decided that the marriage with his foreign wife was morganatic, and that the offspring of the marriage had no claim to the succession. There is no evidence that the birthright passes to the offspring of Bostanai and his second wife, as the Baha'i faith pretends, when the birthright passed to the offspring of first wife. So maybe this is why we've had so much infighting in these groups throughout history, because we have these two specific lines of this exilarch. The son and descendants of Bostanai and his first wife were the successors in the Jewish exilarchy. That is, they were the medieval Jewish exilarchs, while the three sons of Bostanai and his second wife founded regional dynasties in three Iranian provinces, which were Tabaristan, the Buwayhids, that is the Shaharite line. Is that anything to do with Sharia? I wonder, I don't know. And Gilan, the Dabwahides, that is the Davidites, and Mazandaran, the Buddhist-Penites. So the following text is an excerpt from Dayan family tree, which was provided by Mitch Dayan in Seder Hadorot. It is written in the name of Sefer Yohassin that in the year 4420, the matter of Bustanai and Dudava came to pass, and he was called Ma-Zutra. At the same time, the Persian king decreed and killed all of the house of David, from the great to the small, and left no remnant other than one bride. Her husband was killed on the day of their wedding. When she had just become pregnant, the king had a dream in which he was walking through the garden and cutting down all the plants, leaving neither branch nor root, except for one small branch, which he almost destroyed. An old man then came and beat him until he bled, and when he awoke, there was blood spilled on the bed wherein he was sleeping. In the morning, one of the wise men of Israel came and interpreted his dream as referring to his having killed the house of David. He asked that it be ascertained whether there were any branch or root left, and the truth there was none other than the pregnant bride. The king regretted having decimated the house of David, and he took it upon himself to watch over the child that would be born, and so he did. And it came to pass that When she gave birth to a son, she called his name Bustanai or Bustanai, after the garden the king had seen, which is called Bustan in Arabic. The child grew up, and the king commanded that he be brought to him. And he came and stood before the king from morning until evening. He stood in fear and awe before the king, and none of his limbs moved. A fly then came and bit him in his face until he bled, but he did not raise his hand to chase away the fly. When the king saw the great thing, he was very pleased, and he appointed him to be judge. This is the reason that the image of the fly is engraved on the seal, because of the story of Butanai. So it says in Seder Harderot, page 47. This kind of sounds really similar to, or it is a replica of the Bible, how Jesus is the only root and stump of Jesse, and they're kind of claiming this here with this Bustanai. Just rehashing the idea that the Lord of the Flies is known as Satan or the devil. Maybe people had used these names in the past for real people like Bustanai, and to hide the fact that they were the dragon family, or that they represented the serpent seed, or the line that was trying to usurp the throne of Judah from Jesus and go to war with the saints. They made this entity of Satan up to confuse people and take the heat away from people recognizing them as this dragon or Satan family. On page 50b, there is somewhat different version. The family of the house of David was destroyed for having pained Rabbi Hanina, a head of the yeshiva. Rabbi Hanina went to the synagogue and cried so much that he filled a vessel with his tears and drank it. This was the reason for the demise of the house of David, and they all died in one night. The only remnant was the daughter of the said Rabbi Hanani, who had been married to some of the house of David. Rabbi Hanani saw in a dream that he was standing in a garden with an axe in his hand and destroying the garden. An old red-haired man came, beat him until his face turned around backwards, and he said to him, "Why are you destroying my garden?" In the morning he asked the wise men if anyone remained from the house of David, and they replied, "No one remains other than your daughter who is pregnant." It's just like this Mary character we have with the Holy Grail, the chalice of Mary, and the lily, or the rose line of the story of the Messiah that is born through the rose line. He went and sat with her until she gave birth, and he was watching over her. His face returned to its normal state. Now there was an in-law of the house of David who, when he saw that the descendants of her house of David had all died, bribed the king and was appointed prince. When Bustanai grew up, he went to the king, and the pretender was demoted. A fly then appeared into the nose of that in-law of the house of David, and he died. This is the reason that the house of David has the image of the fly on its seal. In the Travels of Benjamin, page 13b, it is written that the grave of the prince Rabbi Bustanai, the head of the exile, is the Pompandita of Nahada. So Bustan is a name of an Arabic origins meaning garden or orchard. It is a name that evokes images of beauty, abundance, and peace. While less common in Western cultures, Bustan is a popular name in some Arabic-speaking countries. So here we have this family claiming that the heritage of the family line comes from this one and only child from the last remnant of a woman who was pregnant with Bustani, some kind of messiah of the Exilarch family. And his name means orchard or garden, sort of like the Garden of Eden or the tree of life, the trees in the garden and the fruit. It's all, I don't believe it for a second, it's all biblical reference back to all of the symbology used for Jesus. I find it really interesting that they used the fleur-de-lis. So we saw Charlemagne before with the fleur-de-lis on his image, as well as the hagel bird of the Holy Roman Empire. So the ancient symbol fleur-de-lis, its meaning and history explained. And the fleur-de-lis, French for lily flower, is an ancient symbol that has long been associated with French royalty, depicting a stylized lily or lotus flower. We encounter the emblem in many places across the world. What makes the fleur-de-lis symbol special is how it has been used in different contexts. This symbol has represented peace, war, religion, politics, royalty, and more. The fleur-de-lis symbol was sporadically used in Babylonian, Indian, Egyptian, and Roman architecture, but it's most associated with French royalty and the church. The fleur-de-lis symbolic association with French monarchs may stem from the baptismal lily used in the crowning of King Clovis I. The symbol has been regarded as a sign of purity ever since antiquity. The Roman Catholic Church adopted the fleur-de-lis symbol to represent the Virgin Mary. When Pope Leo III in 800 crowned Charlemagne as emperor, he is reported to have presented him with a blue banner covered with golden fleur-de-lis. The symbol was later adopted by many European noble families, most notably the French monarchy, to establish an association with the Church. In the 12th century, either King Louis VI or King Louis VII became the first French monarch to use the fleur-de-lis on his shield. So in the 14th century, the fleur-de-lis was often incorporated into the family insignia that was sewn on the knight's surcoat, which was worn over their coat of mail. Thus, the term coat of arms, the original purpose of identification in battle, developed into a system of social status designations after 1483, when King Edmund IV established the Heralds' College to supervise the granting of armor insignia, probably the Knights Templar. The original fleur-de-lis traces its origin back to the hieroglyphs for plant, meaning tree of life. In ancient Egypt, this was meant to represent life and resurrection. It was denoted by two stems curving to the left and right and one in the center. Atop each stem, a lotus flower. The fleur-de-lis as part of the tree of life. When 2 years back I wrote that the fleur-de-lis and the tree of life should not be mixed with the flower of life. So similar that the tree of life can be seen as more sophisticated and complex form of a sacred flower with all components: roots, stem, branches, leaves, buds, fruit, and seeds. In Appendix A, the Assyrian tree of life, Simo Parpola, demonstrates how the simple flower and complex tree ideograms can actually describe the same ideological motive. Note also how the fleur-de-lis is present on the picture 4, 2, and 5 at the top of the head of the winged genie who is carrying water in a bucket and reaching the conifer cone from the tree of life. In a private discussion, Parpola mentions how the middle knots of the tree of life depicts the fleur-de-lis, and by that the innocence and purity of Ishtar in Mesopotamian tradition. 8 of the 6 petaled rosettes symbols are both in balance with the same ideology. In Jewish tradition, the tree of life was symbolized with a 6-branch candlestick called the menorah. The 7th center stem of the candle is called shamash, the sun, and it brings structure to the familiar 6 and 7 division mentioned in the previous part 1. A relief that is on the Ark of Titus, don't forget Titus is the son of Vespasian in Rome, was a depiction of the menorah that stands on a hexagonal podium. There is a fascinating association with the menorah and the oval-shaped mandorla almond symbol, i.e. the Vesica Pisces, which is present in the FOL, as we have learned. Quote, Exodus 25:32-33 says, 6 branches are to extend from the side of the lampstand, and 3 on one side, 3 on the other. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms are to be on the branch, 3 on the next branch, and the same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand. So it says here that the fleur-de-lis symbolizes purity, light, perfection, life, the Holy Trinity, natural world, beauty, and sophistication. Now, if we remember in the last video, the woman who was speaking about the top 3 tier of the Sephirot represented the Jewish people, and they had the legal right over the Goyim, who were the descendants of Noah, and the spiritual right to rule over the Goyim, or the slave people, the slaves they inherit in Tikkun Olam. And so therefore does this mean that the fleur-de-lis represents the Holy Trinity, which would be these three groups, the corona, the crown, the kokma, and the bina? The crown and his Shekinah, the kokma, father, yod, word, wisdom, and bina is the female mother. So if we look at this tree of life and the three branches going off represents the Holy Trinity, which is the Chabad Lubavitch understanding of the Kabbalah and the tree of life, the Jews and their God who rule over the slave race. Basically, this does fit the kings and queens of Europe who believe that they have divine right to rule. And as we've now found out about these Exilarch families being the ancestors of the ruling houses of Europe, they believe they have divine right to rule because they are the lineage of David, but from the evil line that stayed in Babylon and bent their knee to Baal and worshipped the Kabbalah and created the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud as an exegesis of God's word, creating their own law to rule over us, the people. Is it any wonder that these people hated Jesus and what Jesus stood for, which was basically, as I've said in other videos, Christian anarchy, where God gives us the right to rule ourselves as our own personal kings and priests within our own life. So I'm going to leave it there on the Exilarchy. It's filled a whole video, and I did want to go into the information about Ham and Noah and his wife and Semiramis, and how it all ties into Freemasonry and the Noahide laws. Thanks for listening, everyone.